Okay. I think we should just get started. So thank you everyone for coming today. It was lots of technical difficulties. Tried to get it through Zoom so that the studio could all be on there, and then Facebook and Zoom decided to make everything a little bit more difficult. So here we are, we're making things happen, and computer crashes and all. But thank you all so much for coming today, everyone on the Zoom call as well as live on Facebook. My name is Josh. I am the shop manager here at the PAS Schmitt Violin Shop, located in Schmitt Music Brooklyn Center. And I'm happy to be bringing this live stream to you with the help and collaboration of the Violin Technique Coaching Studio under the direction of Dr. Stephanie Allen. Today we're talking about what to look for when we're buying a violin. I'm going to be going through this, kind of be split into three different parts. We'll start with a student-oriented section, kind of looking at the actual physical instruments themselves, what to look for in your first instrument. If you're upgrading, what are some things that can help you choose and kind of differentiate between different instruments. The second part, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the logistics. So finances, why instruments cost, how much they do, all that kind of stuff, as well as some of the specific Schmitt Music and PAS Schmitt financing plans and trade-in things. And then at the end, we'll save for some time for Q&As. Everyone on Facebook, if you have questions, I will be checking the comments for any questions there, as well as the studio family. You're more than welcome to chime in at that point. I'll be using the term violin for most of this. I know most of the studio is violinists, but everyone on Facebook, a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about will translate from, violin to viola to cello. Bass tends to be a little bit different, but there's a lot of helpful things. So this is not a violin exclusive thing. We're just using violin, so I don't have to name all four instruments every time. So, all right, so we'll get started here. So we're talking specifically about the instruments now. So for beginning students, the often question is, what's the difference when we're starting with an instrument? What is the difference between an instrument that you go to a violin shop and get versus one that you can get online? That's probably one of the biggest questions that I get in the shop here. And there's a lot of different things that go into that. Primarily, it's going to be the actual anatomy as well as the structure of the instrument. So a lot of times the kind of cheaper online instruments are what we call violin shaped objects, or ISOs, instrument shaped objects, as we like to call it. A lot of things, especially in the string world, aren't actually done properly. One of the biggest things is the purfling, which, as we know, is the inlaid ebony around the outline of the instrument. A lot of cheaper instruments won't actually have ebony inlaid. A lot of them are, quite frankly, Sharpied on. I've had customers come in and I have rubbed off the purfling from their instruments. So that's a big part of it. And as string players, we know that's a crucial part to keep the tone wood and the big parts of wood from cracking. It's a big prevention thing. So it's really important for the safety of the instrument. Other things tend to be the pegs. So oftentimes they're not fit very well. They're very particular. And so you really want to make sure that you have pegs that are actually working. Obviously, as a beginning student, you're probably using fine tuners, but that's a big part. Bridge and sound posts are also going to be very important. As string players, we know that you can get bridge blanks, and that's how they come, but each bridge is fit to every single instrument specifically. And so if that's not done, that will hinder not only the ability of the instrument to actually produce a sound, but as well as the feel and playability of the instrument overall. And likewise, the sound post is going to be a very important thing as well. And then we talk about the wood itself. Any reputable student instrument. Most of the instruments that we're seeing nowadays are made from Chinese tone woods. So that's going to be any combination of maple or spruce, which is really popular in student and beginning kind of intermediate level instruments. Those are the main woods that you're going to find. but Chinese tone woods, and as we progress further, we're looking at European tone woods. You can talk about the aging process. Obviously, any reputable shop is going to age wood at a certain time. Obviously, if you're finding an instrument from online, that's not going to be quite as aged. So talking about, why you should, find an instrument at a violin shop here. The biggest thing for at least the polishment shop is that every instrument from our student level instruments to our fully handmade instruments are all set up in shop. So we get them just blank, no strings, no bridge, the pegs, all that kind of stuff. Everything from cutting the bridge specifically to the instrument, fitting the sound post, making sure that the fingerboard is dressed, making sure that the peg is all fit and are actually functional. All of that work is set up by our team of 6 luthiers here in the warehouse. So though we're getting these instrument ships across the ocean, in most cases, everything is all finished here inside and in-house. So from there, going from our student level instruments, say you already play violin or a string instrument, what are the differences then between a student level instrument and an upgraded instrument? The biggest thing is going to be the kind of purpose of the instrument. Student instruments serve a very particular function, and it's actual functionality. That's what the instruments are built for. You have a most of the time, a younger student who is just learning how to handle the instrument. And though string instruments tend to be more fragile, the student instruments are built to be a little bit more robust, to be able to withhold kind of being knocked around and accidentally the case dropping and sometimes the instruments dropping. So overall, they're going to hold their structure arguably more so than a performance level instrument. Once we get to those intermediate level instruments, the difference becomes then we switch from functionality then to actual playability and performance of the instrument. So even with our intermediate level instruments, now we're thinking about, okay, what kind of sound does this instrument produce? So naturally that focus then shifts from functionality to then playability, and then the instrument itself will also become more sensitive because it needs to be more sensitive to the player. Why should you step up? A lot of it's going to be talking with your teachers, whether it's private teacher or your public school teacher. But the biggest reason why you're going to step up, I like to use the box of crayons analogy. If you have a student level instrument, you have a box of 6 crayons that you get, and when you're in elementary school, you have your red, your yellow, all your primary colors, all of those basic colors. Once you get more advanced, once you have a foundation of your technique, and now you're getting more advanced, playing in higher registers, wanting to express more through the music, you're limited on a student instrument to those 6 colors. So then you need to buy more colors. So it's going to be able to do the same things. You're still going to have your reds, you're still going to have your blues, greens, all that kind of stuff, but you might have a little bit more nuance in there. You might start getting your red, oranges, different shades of blue and things like that. So a new and more improved instrument offers you that kind of bigger palette as a student, as you're growing musically to work with, and you don't feel like you're fighting, you feel like you're actually working with the instrument. So, and then, like I said, structural differences, that's probably the biggest thing, is the functionality versus the playability. So if we're stepping up instruments and we're trying different instruments, what do? You walk into a violin shop, great, you started on a good student instrument and your teachers told you, okay, you need to go get a new instrument. A lot of times some teachers are more involved than others. A lot of teachers, some even go to the shop for you, pick out instruments, bring them to the lessons. Others are a little bit more kind of hands off and kind of will let you do the process. But if you're coming in, a lot of times I see public school students where the teachers obviously teach you a bigger class, where they come in and they're like, we're looking for a new violin. What do you do to play, and how do you tell the differences between your instrument and the hundreds of instruments that I have behind me? It's very intimidating. So the biggest thing to look for is, again, because we're thinking about performance, it's the sound of the instrument. Each instrument is arguably going to feel different, especially if you're sizing up and upgrading at the same time. So that set aside, we really want the instrument to speak for itself. We're not testing your playing. When you come in, I'm not testing your playing. We're testing the instrument to see if it meets your standards and to see if it fits you as a player. So in that respect, play whatever you're comfortable with. Probably 8 times out of 10, I will run an entire appointment just doing scales. That sometimes I do that. Some students are even so nervous to play that I just bow open strings. That's all. So you don't have to bring your concerto that you've been working on for 2 weeks that you're stressed out about. You don't need to bring a Paganini Caprice because you saw the 5-year-old on TV playing it. You just simply need to come in with an open mind and really think about it as the instrument is actually being tested against you. We got to figure out how the instrument reacts under your hands. And that also means that we need to push the instrument to either extreme. So really wanting to push out a really big sound. Obviously, every instrument will, on the other side, playing soft is also a nuance that we want. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to really get the full range of colors when you really push the instrument volume-wise and pressure-wise to its extremes. So using the whole bow, I get a lot of kids who come in just using a couple inches of bow. That's great. Get warmed up. I will probably kind of semi-bribe you to use every single inch of bow. If I'm going to pay you $100 for every inch of bow, you're going to want to be a millionaire by the time we're done with that appointment. So really use all the resources. Again, thinking we're testing the instrument. No one's there to judge you. We're figuring out what fits you best, and you want to test the instrument to its extremes. Going from there, then we kind of bring in the situation, well, should I upgrade my bow as well? As I upgrade the instrument? Every time that I have a customer who is looking at, most of the time, looking at upgrading both sides, I will have them use their old bow. Even if they're sizing up, I will have them use the 3/4 student size bow or their student level full size bow. The bow will change the sound, but it's also probably the most personal part of your playing. And so we don't want to add and change too many variables at once. We want at least one thing that we're comfortable with and that we know. So even if it's a shorter bow, that's perfectly fine. That's more familiar to the player. Even if they haven't done much bow technique work, that's going to be a lot more comfortable for the student to actually go through. So just makes it easier for when you're playing. Make it easy on yourself, students. And then oftentimes, as you know, coming from the sales end, a lot of the sales associates will ask you questions. And that isn't a way to kind of, say that you like it, you need to buy this thing, but it helps us also, myself, navigate what you want as an instrument. So using different describing words, it's oftentimes really hard to kind of describe your playing and what you're hearing into words, but is the instrument bright? Is the instrument dark? Do you feel like the instrument is projecting? Do you feel like it's kind of muted and kind of introverted? Are you hearing a very clear sound that kind of after you release the bow is lingering still, or is it kind of fading all of a sudden? We talk a lot of times about the cloud of sound that happens around you as well. So that's kind of the overtones, right? Is the instrument extremely resonant, which also may lend itself to the instrument sounding louder because there's more overtones happening? Is it a more simple instrument where it might be projecting and resonant, but there's not quite as many variables and as many overtones happening? So those are kind of couple ways that as you as a player can describe the sounds that you're hearing, and that helps you kind of process your thoughts as you're playing through the instruments, but it also helps us as a sales staff to kind of figure out what exactly you're looking for. So all right, so moving on then to arguably the fun part is the finances and the logistics of buying an instrument. And as we all know, you can spend millions of dollars on an instrument. So at the end of the day, whether you're starting and the student is just giving it a shot, or you are seeing this as a career, it is an investment, just like a car, just like school. school supplies, it is really an investment. So you do want to make the best decisions, and it is a long-term thing, whether that trajectory ends up being a couple months or the lifetime. Investing in the instrument, again, a lot of parents, this is the conversation where it's like, well, why don't I buy the Amazon instrument over the violin shop instrument? As a player, it sets them up for success. Even if they don't continue it for the rest of their life and make it a career, it does set them up for success. The online instruments tend to be more difficult to play because of a lot of the anatomical things and structure of the instruments. So we do want to support your students in a quality instrument. Instrument cost and sticker shock. Why do instruments cost more than others? And this goes even further than, online instruments, but even from why is a student level instrument less expensive than an intermediate level instrument? The two biggest things that go into the cost of an instrument is time and expertise that go behind the instrument. Most of the intermediate level instruments and a reputable student level instrument is going to be made in a workshop, where there's multiple luthiers that are being trained. So it's kind of this supply kind of, I'm forgetting the term, kind of chain. There's someone working on the planing of the wood. There's someone working on the neck. There's separate people, and usually a group of 15, 20 people that are actually working in one category. As we go further and further up, we get to some of the higher end instruments. There's less people involved with the actual making of the instruments. And by the time you get to the handmade instruments, it's one person who spent years learning the craft of violin making that is taking months to start and finish a whole instrument. So that's what you're seeing really in the price. You can talk about tone woods, you can talk about the aging of woods, but really it comes down to the time and experience that's put into that instrument. And then two terms as you go, as you're looking at investing in a violin, are package versus outfit. Package, and this is kind of a business jargon thing. What is the difference? The two terms get used very interchangeably. A package means that the price that's listed on the website here in the shop, that is the cost of the instrument, bow, and case included. That's just, it is what it is. It's a specific bow, a specific case, a specific instrument, and you're not allowed to change those variables, especially in the bow and the case. So for instance, our student level instruments, those would be package prices. And for our intermediate level instruments, we have specific to instruments that are also considered package prices for adult beginners or someone who wants to start on a higher quality instrument. Outfit then gives you the option of a la carte. So it is, you're still buying a bow, case, and an instrument, but you're able to choose then what kind of case you're getting, what price bow you're getting, and what instrument you're getting. So that total outfit price will change. To put numbers in perspective, Schmitt has our student level instruments, our brand new full-size instruments at $1,024. And those are also available on our Better Than Rep plan. So we'll talk about that in a second. Our intermediate level instruments, then, as we get closer to a la carte, we're talking instrument alone, they start at $1,366 just for the instrument, and then we add the price of the bow and the price of the case on top of that. When you're shopping for upper line instruments, it's a really good idea to shop for budget, because the time and experience variable is such I wouldn't say arbitrary, but it's really hard to kind of pinpoint how each shop values their time and values their experience. And so you're a lot of times seeing violins that are within $10, sometimes $50 of each other, and it's not necessarily that one is better than the other, but it's each instrument's going to offer a different palette of colors. So as you're going into a shop, a lot of times what the sales associate will ask you is, what kind of budget are we looking at? That way we can be cognizant, make the whole conversation of money comfortable, right? Make it a safe space, but then be respectful of what those boundaries are, so that we can find the instrument that's best for you. And if I ever have a client that, as really liking an instrument and I feel like, okay, this one's just pushing the budget, but it may be a good option, I will always leave it up to the parent as well as the player to let, is it okay if I show you this instrument, and we'll go forward depending on their discretion. So talking about what the Schmitt Music as well as the Poly Schmitt shop has to offer for payment plans. So what we have at our student level and our intermediate level is what we call our Better Than Rent program, or our Advanced Better Than Rent program. Monthly payments for for violins specifically range around $30, cellos around $50, and basses around $70. And each of those monthly payments in both of those plans go towards the purchase price of the instrument. So you aren't renting with us. We don't take any of that monthly payment as a rental. It all goes towards the cost of the instrument, and every monthly payment, again, is that investment towards the total cost of the instrument. To put it on the Better Than Rent plan, it doesn't take any finance charges. We don't do any credit check behind it, so there's no need for that. Just your driver's license over 18, and a credit card or a checking account to have on file to make those automatic monthly payments, which is also very nice. So each monthly payment going to the purchase price of the instrument, no interest rates or finance charges included. Once we step up to the advanced level instruments, that bumps up to about $60. From there, we have 100% trade-in value. So if you start on a student level instrument, if you start with us on an advanced level instrument and you're ready for that next instrument, or if you're switching between the orchestral family, we either calculate all the monthly payments that you've made up until then and apply that to the next instrument, or if you've paid it off, no matter how many years it's been, we will honor that price that you paid it for and we will apply that. Unlike some of the other shops, that 100% stays at any point in time. So there's not a period where you need to make that change. It is 100%. You could come back 5 years later, and if it's the same student and the same account, we will honor that price that you paid for and apply it. Obviously, like to like. Once we get more advanced, if you're trading, just buying a bow, we would trade in the bow for the bow, violin for the violin, etc. Once we get further from there, we do have a couple of other formal financing options for our instruments that are outside of both of those beginning programs. We have an 18-month zero interest plan where you pay the first payment up front and then splits the remaining into 17 equal payments. Again, that's in-house, so no credit check, just driver's license, and no interest in finance charges as well. And currently, we also partner with Allegro Financing as well, which is third party. So if you are wanting more flexible terms, you can opt for that. It does go through a soft credit check. Everyone that works through Schmitt does get approved for a financing plan, and we call it what we call our waived interest. So you will actually sign up for a plan with financing between, most of the time it's anywhere from 6 to like 72 months, and you choose a time frame to pay it off in. And then Allegro Financing through Schmitt will offer you a waived interest option. So if you pay it off, say if you choose a 36-month term and you choose to pay it off in 12 months, they will then waive the interest for you. So it's a couple of different ways to then pay for the instrument if you want that flexibility. Otherwise, if that credit check is unfortunately a hindrance, we do have those in-house financing options as well. The 18-month does have a $5,000 cap. So anything above 5,000, you would just need to make a bigger down payment there. For the higher level instruments, like the handmade instruments, that is more of a kind of a private conversation that Pete Schmitt oftentimes will have with the customer. So if you have any customers that are looking kind of that 8,000 range and above, and looking at, how do we afford the instrument outside of the Allegro financing, we are oftentimes able to do a lot for our customers as well. All right. Well, that kind of concludes my talk, and I'll stop talking there. But let's open it up for any questions for the teachers, for the parents, for the students. And Facebook, I will be watching the comments. So if you are watching live and have any questions, feel free to chime in.
When you have students come into the shop, are typically students only buying full-size violins, or do you have them come in and finance the little ones as well? Like that, all the sizes, and And what do those typically look like a fourth size price, half size, three-fourths? What is that kind of, that sticker
Mhm.
shock, I guess I could say?
Absolutely. And for Facebook, since it's the mic, the question is, do I have a lot of customers looking at fractional instruments, smaller instruments, and doing that plan with that? We do that, especially in the student plan. We have a lot of that. The total cash price for any of our fractional size instruments is $924 for a brand new or reconditioned instrument. So, and most of the time it is the same exact monthly payment, because Schmitt Music has a very strong relationship with a lot of the public schools. Oftentimes we will have some different variables. So some schools may, include some accessories, but then ask for a higher down payment, and the monthly payment may change due to the teacher's choice of demographic or those specific needs. So that monthly payment sometimes will change. But yeah, I have tons of students that come in, starting on quarters, sometimes eighth size instruments, and we do offer that for student level instruments. I actually have hiding somewhere a 32nd size violin that's in the shop as well, the tiny little thing. But the other nice thing for any younger students who are more advanced, we do offer those intermediate level options at a fractional size as well. So specifically the Eastman 315, which if any of you are familiar with Eastman's line of instruments, the traditional model is the 305. So the 315 is a Schmitt exclusive. You aren't able to get that brand new outside of Schmitt Music. And the two biggest differences are the tone woods that we're using and then the varnish application that we're using. So it's a higher quality varnish, a lot more hand done work on the varnish instead of a spray overcoat. And then the actual wood, the 305s are made with Chinese woods still at that. The 405 then changes to European woods. The 315s are made with European tone wood. So you are supplied with that higher quality tone wood as well. But yeah, tons of people that come in for fractional size instruments as well. And we do offer that at an intermediate level. Any other questions from the studio here? Otherwise, I have a couple kind of frequently asked questions that we can go through as well.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Often do you get like a great sounding, great tone instrument, but doesn't really have a name attached or a brand, that a professional would be interested in because of its variety of tone? Is that common? Is that,
Yeah, oftentimes we're able to trace most instruments. The Schmitt shop arguably is one of the younger shops in the area, so we don't quite have the inventory that a lot of the shops that have been around for a longer time have. But the common ones where it's not a label are oftentimes the late 1800 instruments that are German made. Those are really common. And those instruments, obviously, as they grow older, the wood kind of opens up and different tone colors start to show. But at that point in time, a lot of those were actually also commercially made instruments. So brand new, we're looking at commercially made instruments. Most of the time they go up to about 6,000 for violins. Occasionally we'll find violins, like I said, old German instruments that were commercially made that have, been maintained well enough and do sound pretty great. Other instruments are usually smaller makers that maybe their career didn't quite take off. And so due to their trajectory as a luthier, the price of the instrument tends to be a little lower. Or if there's more involvement, if you're a violin making nerd, we actually have a Mizell family violin, which is a family based, I believe, in Owatonna, who made violins, and a lot of the time it was the family collaborating. So we have one of those instruments as well, where it's sometimes more people, but more experienced hands with that. So you'll see those, pretty occasionally, but a lot of the time the sound of the instrument ends up being the quality of the setup as well.
Do you have a recommended price based on the quality of the instrument for, let's say, somebody who is going to keep violin in their lives post 12th grade or whatever, and as a beautiful, enriching creative outlet in their adult life, as opposed to somebody majoring in music or
Mhm.
choosing that career, what is that respectable starting point or
Yeah.
range?
Yeah, for sure. If we're looking at majoring in music, you're looking at going to college, probably going into undergrad. It's probably a good idea to be upgrading to at least a fully handmade instrument when you're going into your undergrad. At that point, it kind of depends. If you're at a conservatory, that price range will probably be a little bit bigger than if you're at like a local university studying violin performance. It really depends on that. Again, a lot of this depends on what your trajectory is and where you're at skill level wise. So handmade instruments, again, any reputable ones are going to start around 10,000 and go up from there. If you're, for lack of a better term, a hobbyist, if you enjoy playing the instruments, that at that point it comes down to how much do you value your playing as well. And oftentimes, I even have educators, for instance, where their primary instrument is not one, but they do teach on, like, I have a friend of mine who came in who's a violist who is teaching, and she came in to buy a violin, and for her, she doesn't have that big of a budget but needed something that was still going to sound nice, and the instrument that she ended up going with was one of our 1366 instruments. From there, nicer quality, less and less. If you're wanting kind of still that bigger palette of sound, you're probably thinking around 4 to 6,000 for something that's kind of bridging that. If you still want a big wide range of options in tone quality and tone colors, usually 4 to 6 is where I see most kind of hobbyists land in price range. Any other questions that I can answer in the studio? We've got a lot of teachers. Any players that have any questions about violin shopping, violin buying?
I love how you mentioned that they don't need to be afraid when they come in to play.
Yes.
I have students say, "What should I play?" And I said, "I think just whatever you're working on, some scales, go as high as you can, play as loud and as soft, those extremes." But that's really wonderful that you put them at ease and make them feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's making the client, which for oftentimes is for me two different clients. We have the parent and the student. And both are equally as important, and that kind of, lack of a better term, power struggle is something that, as a sales associate, you need to respect and kind of figure out the boundaries. So as comfortable as I can get both parties about talking about everything from finances to the actual playing of the instruments, that's our goal. Because again, like I said, we're testing the instruments. I'm not there to see if you practiced your scales last night, if you can play a 3-octave scale and tune on the bat. You've probably not played all day. So again, it's putting the instrument to the test, and it's figuring out, is this instrument good for you or not?
And does Schmidt allow, I know when I send students to go get violins, I'm a bit more hands off. I don't usually go to the shop with them. I'm sending them to shops where I know the associates are skilled. So often though, with an investment that large, even the 1066 or the 1366, whatever, that's still a lot of money. I'll say, is it possible for us to test a couple instruments for a couple weeks, 2, 3? How does that work? And do you see that often?
Yeah, so for the Facebook audience, basically we're talking about what does the trial system look like for Schmidt. For us and most of the other pro shops, generally we'll start with a week, and it's usually 2 to 3 instruments on trial. If, for instance, you come in on a Tuesday, or Tuesday, you don't have a lesson this week, say it's spring break, and you have a lesson with your teacher the next Thursday. If you need a little bit more time, we're pretty flexible with that. Especially because a lot of times the students that are coming in, we have a relationship not only with them, but they're indirectly through their teacher as well. So for us, for safety reasons, we take a credit card on file for the worst case scenario, as well as a driver's license for security reasons. We don't charge for that. We don't put a holding balance on the card or the account or anything like that. It's just for security. And most of the time we'll start with a week. That usually gives the student as well as the teacher time to kind of, get to know the instruments not only personally and physically, but also in their own practice space, being able to play at home and such in their own acoustic space, because that will also change the response of the instrument. And at that point, if we're looking at, if even if the student is like, okay, I'm kind of between these two, it also will solidify or challenge their initial thoughts in the appointment process. And then we either go back to the drawing board, try a couple different things. If it's higher quality instruments, maybe get a luthier involved to do some adjustments, or it solidifies the purchase, and then we go from there to figure out what the next steps are. Same exact thing for bows. If not, I'm a lot more lenient on bows because it is a lot more touchy topic, just because it is so personal. But yeah, if you're working with it, if you're in communication, obviously I can't speak to the other shops, but if you're in communication with myself or any of the sales associates, we're never unreasonable. We want to make sure that you have the best experience, and we want to make sure that you're comfortable with the instrument that you invest in. All right. Well, if that is all for the questions, then last call, kind of. I'm not seeing any more comments on Facebook. But thanks so much for your time. I am very happy to have done this collaboration. It's a lot of fun, and it's a world that is very, very mysterious. You kind of walk into and you're like, what am I really getting myself into? So as much as we can clear the air and be able to talk comfortably about it, it's never fun, having a passion, and it's like, well, we don't want to talk about actually buying the instrument. So if you have any questions, I am available. Again, you can email us at the Violin Shop at schmittmusic.com. My personal email is joshua.choi at schmittmusic.com. Otherwise, feel free to private message us on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We also are on TikTok. It is a Schmitt Music TikTok, and we have an instrument that actually went viral and went to 2.8 million views. So if anyone's looking for a really nice viola, you know where to come. But feel free to reach out if you have any questions. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. DM us for that. Email Dr. Stephanie Allen if you have any questions as well, and if we need to make a part 2 video, we're more than happy to answer some more questions there. So yeah, we'll be posting this as well on our Facebook as well as our YouTube page, so if you want to go back, if you have any questions that were answered, feel free to go back as well. But great, thank you all so much for your time. Thanks, Facebook audience, and we will see you on the next live stream. All right, bye-bye.